Starting off this countdown, we have the Angel's Landing. In the early 2000s, a man named Daniel Perez, or Lou Castro, led a cult that lived at Angel's Landing. They all lived on a 20-acre property outside of Wichita, Kansas. Now, Perez had control of these followers because he convinced them that he was an angel and a seer that could look into the future and know exactly when they were going to die. Obviously, that was false. In reality, he would kill off his followers and use their life insurance policies to become rich. He was getting away with it for a while until police looked into the death of one of his followers, Patricia Hughes. In 2003, her dead body was found on the compound. Then in 2006, her husband mysteriously passed away. This all led the police back to Perez, who had changed his identity to Lou Castro. Eventually, he was caught and sentenced to 80 years in prison for the lengthy list of his disturbing crimes he committed. Yikes. In our ninth spot today, we have the Children of God. Formed in 1968, the Children of God, now referred to as the Family International, is a cult that believes in salvation and spiritual revolution and happiness. But as the group got a big following, their beliefs shifted. From there, the followers were forced to engage in dark practices, like having the females lure men into the cult by having intercourse with them. Sadly, the followers were often mistreated in multiple ways. One woman who was a part of this cult as a child referred to it as living hell. It literally traumatized her. 31 people died at the hands of this cult. And like I said, it's still active, but in 2004 just changed its name to Family International. Moving on to number 8, we have the Brethren. This one is quite interesting. So the Brethren have also been given the name the Body of Christ, or Brothers and Sisters, and even Garbage Eaters. Why? Well, you're about to find out, that's for sure. So for starters, this cult believes that the end of the world is near, and so they are told they have to purify themselves in preparation for the end of the world. They do this by selling their possessions and breaking ties with all their family and friends. They then live as vagrants, eating garbage, hardly ever bathing, and never receive any medical treatment. They also do weird jobs to make money, but then any money they earn just goes right into the group. Due to this lifestyle, a number of group members have had serious mental breakdowns, others have sadly taken their lives. Not a cult you would want to be a part of. Honestly, no cult you want to be a part of.
The Order was an American white supremacist group that was active between September of 1983 and December of 1984. Robert J. Matthews, the leader of the Order, was a fanatical figure with a rather dangerous agenda. He believed in a vision of a white ethno-state and advocated for a race war to achieve this goal. Matthews encouraged his followers to engage in acts of violence against perceived enemies. Under his guidance, the Order carried out a series of criminal activities to fund their operations and further their agenda. This included bank robberies and armored car heists, stolen funds being used to purchase weapons and explosives. The group also targeted individuals they viewed as threats, which included law enforcement officers. The Order's violent actions resulted in the death of radio talk show host Alan Berg, who was just one of many enemies the group had on their hit list. The FBI launched a manhunt to apprehend Matthews and put an end to the Order. In a deadly confrontation at a home in Whidbey Island, Matthews engaged in a shootout with law enforcement after refusing to surrender. The gunfire ignited a fire in the house, taking Matthews down with it. Next up, we have the Church of Euthanasia. Now, this one certainly isn't as evil as the other cults on this list, but it's still pretty extreme. I would not be able to stand hanging out with any of these people. The Church of Euthanasia, founded in Boston, Massachusetts in 1992 by Chris Korda, is a controversial cult known for its extremist views on population control and environmentalism. They've been considered by many as promoting evil ideologies due to the cult's radical stance on reducing the human population through pretty disturbing means. The church advocates for taking one's own life, cannibalism, just a couple of different methods. They set out to achieve their goal of lowering the global population. Now, while the church does claim to use satire to make a point about overpopulation's impact on the environment, their slogan is pretty disgusting, and no, I can't say it on here, nor would I really want to. Next up, we have the narco-Satanists led by Adolfo Constanzo. His group was mostly active in Mexico in the 1980s, revolving around a combination of drug trafficking and occult practices. Constanzo grew up with a mother and stepfather who were both involved in crime. He also had this quote-unquote sorcerer dude who he had apprenticed under, who he would perform ritualistic sacrifices of animals with. Eventually, he gathered a bit of a following of powerful hitmen and drug traffickers. He exerted a strong hold over them, convincing them that he had supernatural powers. And under his influence, the cult engaged in illegal activities, including drug smuggling and violent rituals. Constanzo's evil deeds culminated in a series of these ritualistic murders where innocent victims were brutally sacrificed in an attempt to enhance the cult's powers. Finally, in 1989, law enforcement closed in on the group and Constanzo pulled a machine gun on authorities, leading to a final confrontation before ordering a fellow member to take his life. Number 4, Hanohana Sampaguyo. The Hanohana Sampaguyo cult was a religious group founded in Japan by Hogen Fukunaga. Fukunaga claimed to be the reincarnation of Buddha. Here we go. And convinced his followers that he possessed divine powers. The cult became known for its pretty extreme financial exploitation of the members. Fukunaga convinced his followers to donate significant amounts of money, claiming that doing so would bring them blessings and aid in their spiritual development. He also claimed he could diagnose people by reading their feet and would charge like $900 for these readings. Turns out the guy started the group while he was in tremendous amounts of debt, so he was just a full-on swindler, used car salesman type guy. He knew full well what he was doing. He didn't actually have some deranged belief in his message, and that's what's truly evil about this guy. He amassed some serious wealth through these donations, living a lavish lifestyle while his followers suffered financially. Next up, we have David Koresh's Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians cult was a religious group that gained attention due to its leader, David Koresh. The story actually begins, though, with Benjamin Roden, who founded it in 1955. But it was David who later emerged as the prominent figure. He joined the group in the early 80s, claiming to be a prophet and the final messenger of God. His manipulative tactics quickly became evident as he instilled fear and loyalty amongst his followers through strict control and psychological manipulation. He dictated every aspect of their lives, including relationships, daily activities, and inside the cult, he practiced polygamy and engaged in inappropriate relationships with some of his female followers. Can't go into too much detail on that. Common theme amongst these supremely morally superior cult leaders, though. In 1993, the cult's troubles escalated with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or the ATF, who attempted to execute a search warrant on the cult's compound in Waco, Texas. The raid turned into this violent shootout, resulting in the deaths of several agents and cult members. It led to a 51-day standoff between the Branch Davidians and law enforcement. And the standoff ended in absolute disaster when the compound caught fire and the flames just started engulfing all these buildings, resulting in the deaths of 76 Branch Davidians, including the leader David Koresh, or Koresh. Next up, we have Aum Shinrikyo. The Aum Shinrikyo cult was a religious group founded in Japan in 1987 by Shoko Asahara. Initially, the cult kind of presented itself as a spiritual organization with the aim of helping people achieve enlightenment, but as time passed, it became pretty evident that the group had more malevolent intentions. Asahara pulled the strings, manipulating his followers into committing a bunch of horrific acts. He instilled a sense of blind loyalty amongst his disciples, using mind control techniques to exert complete control over their thoughts, actions. But under his direction, Aum Shinrikyo carried out a series of violent acts, including, of course, the infamous Tokyo subway sarin gas attack in 1995 that resulted in the deaths of 13 people and injured 2000s. The act was planned to just be the tip of the iceberg too, and the extreme measures they were going to use to fulfill their goals. Asahara claimed to prophesize this apocalyptic vision and believed in imminent global destruction, leading his followers to stockpile weapons and engage in activities aimed at kind of destabilizing society. He had this complete disregard for human life and was willing to harm others to fulfill his ambitions. He even made a statement about how disappointed with what he saw as a low death toll in the 1995 subway attacks. And finally, we have the Anthill Kids. The Anthill Kids was a cult led by Roch Thériault in 1977. The group was based in Canada and followed a pretty twisted belief system. Essentially, they were a doomsday cult, but Thériault's charismatic manipulation led his followers to believe he possessed divine powers and that with his help, they would be the sole survivors of this coming apocalypse. Pretty standard cult stuff, but man, this is the worst cult I've ever read about. It's really gross. Can't talk about most of it on here, but anyway. Under his influence, the cult members isolated themselves from the outside world, creating a closed, kind of secretive community on a mountainside that their divine leader didn't even help them build. He just kind of sat back and watched. And behind this facade of spiritual enlightenment, Thériault subjected his followers to severe physical and psychological mistreatment. He enforced strict and incredibly bizarre rules on them, and he started becoming increasingly more erratic in his behavior. His true nature came out in acts of violence and control, inflicting harm on his followers in the name of discipline and purification. Some members endured severe physical torture, including beatings. They'd have amputations done on them. This guy claimed he had magical powers that would allow him to reattach his followers' body parts, and his reign of terror eventually led to the death of one of his many wives, and he was eventually arrested but received an incredibly light sentence because it's Canada, and wouldn't you know it, he went back to doing the exact same crap before being arrested again, and years later a fellow inmate put an end to him for good.
At number 10, we have foot reading cult. Hono Hana Sanpongyo is a cult with a foot fetish. Often known as the foot reading cult, founder Hogan Fukugana believes that he is the reincarnation of Jesus and Buddha, because I guess two birds, one stone, one footy stone. Fukugana charges $900 for foot readings, claiming that he can diagnose people's problems and cure them, but he also claimed that people would die if they didn't pay him or let him examine their feet properly. 4 cult members were also known to die during their rigorous initiation rites at the base of Mount Fuji. Good news for those of you with fat toes though, it seems it means that actually your life will be filled with good fortune. Coming into number 9, we have the cult of the dead cow. I mean, it doesn't sound great, does it? To be honest, it isn't what I thought though. It seems that the Cult of the Dead Cow is actually a web hacking group that was formed at a slaughterhouse in the 1980s. Now these guys coined the term hacktivism. The group have been known to circulate controversial e-zines, including an article called Sex with Satan. That being said, it seems that the group are very well respected in the online community and are committed to whistleblowing and doing good. So maybe the scariest thing about them is their name, and the fact that they were formed in a slaughterhouse, which makes me feel really weird and slightly uncomfortable. Coming into number 8, we have the Satanic Temple. They're an absolute classic, aren't they? I actually get confused between the Satanic Temple and the Temple of Lucifer, who we mentioned in a previous cult list. Now the Church of Lucifer participated in a lol-worthy Vice documentary in which they showed off their sultry headquarters, which featured a lot of red leather and a backlit statue of Satan. The Satanic Temple are kinda like same but different. Lucien Greaves is the founder and spokesman for the Satanic Temple, which is headquartered in Salem, Massachusetts, because witchy. The group claimed to not actually be affiliated with the Dark Lord, Beelzebub, Lucifer himself, but are more set against Christian privilege. Although that being said, in 2013, they claimed that they were thrilled that their satanic children could pray to Satan in school as a result of Senate Bill 98. They also enjoyed making snake-tivity scenes instead of nativity scenes at Christmas. As a Slytherin, I'm kind of curious. It seems to me that the group is more concerned with general anarchy than actual satanic worship, although hurrah for them as they've been recognized as an official religion by the IRS, which means they're now rolling in that satanic dough.
Next, we have the Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple was a secretive religious cult founded in 1984 by Luc Jouret and Joseph de Membro. The cult blended elements of Christianity, New Age philosophy, occultism. Members believed in a combination of conspiracy theories and the impending end of the world that was supposedly going to take place at some point in the mid-90s. The Order of the Solar Temple gained some attention due to a series of mass self-inflicted deaths committed by its followers. In 1994, the leaders told their members that they needed to transcend their physical forms to begin their new lives in the afterlife. 53 members, including Jouret and de Membro, took their own lives at various locations across Switzerland. They were found dead by authorities after remote-controlled devices had ignited fires at these various locations. In the following years, similar incidents occurred in other locations in France and Canada. Alright, this next one is nuts. The Branch Davidians. This one is mostly remembered for the massive siege that took place, leading to the deaths of several members as well as several government agents who were raiding the compound. The Branch Davidians were a religious cult led by David Koresh. The group established a compound near Waco, Texas, known as Mount Carmel Center. The Branch Davidians held apocalyptic beliefs and considered Koresh to be a kind of messiah of sorts. In February of 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the ATF, launched a raid on the compound based on suspicions of illegal firearms being held there. The raid resulted in a shootout, leading to the deaths of 4 ATF agents and 6 of the Branch Davidians. 51-day standoff then ensued, and during which negotiations failed to kind of resolve the situation, and on April 19th, 1993, the FBI initiated a tear gas assault on the compound in an attempt to force Branch Davidians out. However, a fire broke out within the compound, resulting in the deaths of 76 people, including Koresh. The exact cause of the fire remains to be a bit of a mystery. Some argue it was intentionally set by the Branch Davidians, and others think it was caused by the FBI's actions. Number 5, NXIVM. NXIVM was really a cult masked as a quote-unquote self-help organization. It was founded by Keith Raniere in 1998. It was marketed as a personal development program, attracting wealthy members, including celebrities and CEOs. But beneath its facade, the organization engaged in manipulative practices and illegal activities. Raniere established a hierarchical structure within NXIVM, with himself at the top, of course. Not only was it a pyramid scheme, but Raniere used manipulative tactics to control and exploit his female followers in even worse ways. The group was accused of branding its members with a symbol that represented his initials and engaging in sexual exploitation. Raniere had actress Allison Mack lead a subgroup within NXIVM called DOS, which was supposedly a group created to empower women, but actually functioned to recruit women as slaves, who Raniere would blackmail in order to remain subservient. In 2017, investigative journalists began exposing the dark side of the group, leading to the arrest and the conviction of Keith Raniere and several high-ranking members in 2018. The Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, the MRTCG, was a religious cult based in Uganda. The cult was founded in 1989 by Credonia Merende and Joseph Kubiteri. I'm probably really messing up those names, but they claim to have received messages from the Virgin Mary herself. The cult emphasized strict adherence to the Ten Commandments. They gained a significant following, and its leaders predicted an apocalyptic event to occur on December 31st, 1999. However, when this prophesized doomsday did not actually take place, tensions within the group began to escalate. The leaders now said March 17th, 2000 would be the new day, and that it would be reined in with this massive celebration. Hundreds of members attended at a church, but almost as soon as the celebration began, a massive fire was set off. The doors and windows to the church had been boarded up in advance, and an estimated 530 members died in the inferno. There was also a series of coordinated mass attacks that took place at various other cult compounds. The exact number of victims remains a bit unclear. Estimates range from several hundred to over 1,000 though, and the bodies of the 5 principal leaders were never found, and it's thought that they may have just escaped. Number 3, Shinrikyo. Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984. The cult gained worldwide attention when it carried out a series of deadly attacks in the 1990s. Asahara claimed to be a spiritual leader and preached a mix of Buddhism and some other religions, blending them with his own apocalyptic visions. The cult had thousands of followers in Japan and aimed to overthrow the government and establish this new world order, kind of. In 1995, Shinrikyo orchestrated the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack, where several of his members released sarin, a deadly nerve agent, on 5 different subway trains across the city, which resulted in the deaths of 13 people and injured thousands. Following the subway attack, the Japanese authorities cracked down on the group, and Asahara and other members were arrested, and the cult was banned in 1996. Asahara and several other cult members were later convicted and sentenced to death for their involvement in the attacks. And number 2, we have the Anthill Kids. The Anthill Kids were formed by Roch Thériault in 1977 in Saint Marie, Quebec. He claimed to be a prophet who had received a message from God that the world would end in February of 1979. Began growing a following and convinced everyone to leave their jobs, their homes, and just cut off all contact with their families to join him on this commune by a mountainside, which he referred to as Eternal Mountain. He had everyone build the town while he just sat back and watched, and he gave them the group the name the Anthill Kids, as he thought they worked like a group of ants. Now in 1979, as we all know, the world didn't end, so people started to question him, and he was like, God's time works differently up there. It's different than it is here on Earth. We got our lines crossed. Don't worry, it'll happen. And while all this was going on, Roch was growing increasingly more violent and controlling. He ended up impregnating all the women, fathering about 20 children. He would also perform drunken operations on some of his members in order to prove he had the power to heal them. This led to him being in prison for 2 years, but once he got out, he was right back to it and ended up taking the life of one of his wives in one of these insane surgeries. He also nearly took the life of another one of his wives, having attacked her with an axe. She miraculously managed to escape though, and Roch was finally arrested and sentenced to life in prison, where another inmate fortunately got rid of him. And finally, we have the People's Temple. Yes, the Jim Jones cult. Jim Jones founded the People's Temple in 1954 in Indianapolis. By 1974, Jones had started getting some bad press, to say the least. Things were coming out about how badly he treated the members, and a lot went on, like way more than I'd be able to discuss in a top 10 list like this, but in an attempt to escape the evils of media scrutiny, Jones convinced about 1,000 of his members to move to Guyana, where he claimed he was going to create this utopian society, completely cut off from the prying eyes of the outside world. He rented a plot of land, named it the People's Temple Agricultural Project, but it was just referred to as Jonestown usually. And Jonestown was anything but a utopia. Members were not allowed to leave and were punished violently for going against Jones's word. It was a full-on dictatorship, kind of ironic given his political leanings. In 1978, a politician by the name of Leo Ryan was investigating the People's Temple. Came to Jonestown, where several members secretly told him that they wanted out. The group made their way to a plane. They were gunned down by some of Jones's security, and later that day, Jones convinced his remaining followers to drink a concoction of grape-flavored Flavor Aid laced with cyanide. Some didn't want to drink it and were forcibly injected. In the end, 918 people lost their lives.
Coming in at number 10 is the People's Temple. In the 1950s, Indiana native Jim Jones founded a church that he claimed promoted socialism and equality with religious elements of Christianity. Initially, he was a little more than a charismatic hustler, but as the years progressed, he demanded more and more of followers. In the early 1970s, Jones moved his group to California and set them up in a
commune-like settlement in Redwood Valley. Jones eventually came to believe that a nuclear war was imminent and moved his followers again to the South American country of Guiana, which he thought would be outside the potential danger zone. The group lived there for several years as the People Temple Agricultural Project, but after former members started speaking out against the church, San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan decided to travel to Jonestown to investigate claims of mistreatment. Temple security guards opened fire on Leo's group, and back at the settlement, Jones ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced beverage. Now this is where the phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid" originates. A total of 918 people died in the incident, and until 2001 it was the largest loss of American civilian life in history. Number 9. Narco-Satanists. Adolfo Constanzo was a cult leader who led an infamous drug trafficking and occult gang in Mexico. His cult members nicknamed him the Godfather, and he led the cult with Sarah Alderete, whose followers named the Godmother. Now the cult was involved in multiple ritualistic deaths, including the death of Mark Kilroy, an American student who died in Matamoros in 1989. Mark was taken by his abductors to a ranch where he was tortured and sodomized for hours before dying in a human sacrifice ritual. His life was ended with a machete blow, and then he had his brain removed and boiled in a pot. The cult then inserted a wire through his spinal column, amputated his legs at the knees, and buried him at the ranch along with 14 other people who had their lives taken before him. Adolfo told his followers that human sacrifice granted them immunity from law enforcement for their drug smuggling operations. Now Adolfo, Sarah, and the rest of the cult went on the run when detectives discovered their shrine. Eventually, the police found their hideout in Mexico City on May 6, 1989, and after shootout, Adolfo and one of his accomplices were shot, and Sarah was convicted of criminal association in 1990 and jailed for 6 years. Number 8. Love Has Won. On April 28, 2021, the mummified remains of Amy Carlson, the leader of the group Love Has Won, were found in a home in Moffat, Colorado. Amy was known as her followers as Mother God and claimed to be able to cure cancer and communicate with angels. The group proclaimed that Amy was a divine 19-billion-year-old being who had birthed all creation. She claimed that she had been reincarnated 534 times, including as Jesus, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, and Cleopatra, and would lead 144,000 people into a mystical fifth dimension. According to affidavits taken by the county sheriff's office, the group was brainwashing people and stealing their money. A core group of 12 to 20 members lived with Amy, and this group did daily live streams on YouTube in order to recruit more members, solicit donations, and promote new age products and vitamin supplements. The group offered etheric surgery, which cost $88 per session, claiming that they could remove sickness and negative energy from the body.
Number 7. NXIVM. This is a photo taken of several members of the group, many whose faces have been obscured, with a few prominent members like Allison Mack and leader Keith Raniere clearly visible. NXIVM was a self-help group turned cult that got into hot water. The leader, Keith Raniere, was accused of running a secret society within NXIVM where people, mostly women, go figure, were manipulated into having intimate relationships with him. These members were also branded, and they were blackmailed in order to keep quiet about everything. Some high-profile folks, like Smallville actress Allison Mack, got caught up as well. The whole thing was a complete mess, but luckily, in the end, the creep Raniere got convicted on various charges. Mack and others also faced legal consequences. But Raniere is still involved in the cult from behind bars, with several members branching off, still being active today. At number 6, we have Love Has Won. This is the last photo of Amy Carlson, leader of a cult called Love Has Won. You probably see something immediately off about her complexion. It has a gray, bluish tint to it. That's because she was ingesting high amounts of silver. Carlson claimed to be the embodiment of a spiritual figure, often referring to herself as the divine or Mother God. Love Has Won attracted followers who believed in Carlson's divine status and followed her spiritual teachings. Carlson claimed to have been reincarnated like hundreds of times, having been some pretty big names in her former lives: Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, Cleopatra, and of course, Jesus. I had no idea that all those people were the same person. It's pretty incredible. She also claimed to have talked to Robin Williams after he died, of course. Donald Trump was also her father in a past life. I mean, what a legacy. She also preached that lizard people were part of a cabal that was forcing the planet to be in a low vibration state. Now, this is all pretty goofy, but nothing evil, right? Well, several former members came out talking about all the manipulation. Yeah, manipulation. Really? There's manipulation going on here? I didn't realize. And also mistreatment. And this all went on at the hands of Amy and other higher-ups in the group. There was also apparently a lot of racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric going on, which really doesn't surprise me when you read the long list of insane stuff this lady was talking about. Oh, hippies, you truly are the worst. In 2021, news broke that Amy Carlson had passed away. Her body was discovered in a residence in Colorado where the group was based. She was basically mummified, with her eyes almost having rotted away completely. Looks like love lost. Loser. Next on the list we have the Branch Davidians. This photo here was taken during the famous 51-day siege of former leader David Koresh's compound in Waco, Texas in 1993. So without any context, it looks just like any other fire, but looking at these images, knowing what was going on, that so many people were dying, it's just very dark. In the early 90s, the Branch Davidians were a doomsday cult being led by David Koresh, who managed to convince everyone he was the final prophet. He and several other members were living in a compound near Waco, Texas. The authorities got involved due to suspicions about illegal weapons in the compound, which there very much were. In 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to raid the compound, and it went south pretty fast. A shootout ensued, leaving several dead on both sides. The situation just continued to escalate, and the FBI ended up taking over. They surrounded the compound for a lengthy siege. Eventually, the FBI launched a final assault using tear gas. A few hours later, a fire erupted within the compound. It's still unclear how it actually started. Some believe the FBI caused it, but there's others that blame the Davidians themselves. In any case, though, the compound burned down and Koresh died inside, along with many of his followers. Number 4, the Children of God. This is a photo of members of the Children of God in prayer. You wouldn't know it based on this image alone, but there were some very dark things going on behind closed doors, and it just adds a very dark layer to images like this one. The cult is still active today, but now they really want to distance themselves from former leader David Berg and the horrific things that went on in the 70s and 80s, now calling themselves the Family International. The group was founded by David Berg, aka Satan personified, in the late 1960s. They started out as a hippie-like group with unconventional beliefs. They believed in a combination of Christianity and free love, often engaging in communal living, and you could probably guess what that entailed based on the whole free love thing. As the group evolved, allegations of exploitation and mistreatment began to come to light, and members were reportedly encouraged to use physical intimacy as a means of recruiting new followers, a practice known as flirty fishing. Several members started seeing the dark side of the group, though, and I can't really go into details here, but suffice to say, this was not a group you would ever want to raise a family in. Former members have come out since, accusing the cult of using mind control techniques and subjecting followers to psychological manipulation and much worse. Next on the list, we have Shinrikyo. This photo here is of the military cleaning a subway car after the Tokyo subway sarin attack of 1995. Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. The group became infamous after the deadly Tokyo subway sarin gas attack in 1995, which took the lives of 13 people and injured over 1,000. Asahara proclaimed himself to be Christ and the only one who could save followers from the coming apocalypse. The cult kind of blended elements of several religions and spiritual traditions with its leaders' doomsday prophecies. The group had a very large following, including some highly educated members. The cult was involved in a number of violent attacks, but the Tokyo subway attack was the worst of the worst, and following this incident, authorities finally cracked down on the cult, leading to the arrest of Asahara and other key members. Asahara was finally sentenced to death for his role in the crimes, but surprisingly, the cult is still active to this day. Number 2, the True Russian Orthodox Church. This is a photograph of part of the Doomsday Cult's cave hideout. I think I'd rather just die in the apocalypse than live in that dump, especially because the leader of this cult didn't even let his followers watch TV. What are you gonna do down there? Pyotr Kuznetsov led a Russian Doomsday Cult that gained international attention when in 2007, several members of the cult, known as the True Russian Orthodox Church, barricaded themselves in a remote cave in the Panza region. Kuznetsov wasn't with them as he was in police custody. He claimed to be a prophet, and his teachings combined elements of Christianity with apocalyptic visions. The cult believed that the world would soon come to an end, and isolating themselves in the cave, they hoped to be saved from the impending apocalypse. Authorities were alerted to the location of the cave, but members inside were threatening to take their own lives if police tried to intervene. As the situation continued to escalate, authorities became more and more concerned about the well-being of the cult members, especially given reports of starvation and just the harsh conditions inside the cave. After several months, Russian security forces intervened to finally remove the followers from the cave. 2 members had died over the winter, and they'd created these toxic fumes within the cave. Kuznetsov attempted to take his own life after he'd realized his doomsday prediction was wrong. His whereabouts are not currently known to the public, but it's believed that he is still alive. And finally, we have Adolfo Constanzo. This photo here kind of looks like a witch's cauldron, and that's pretty much exactly what it is. The cauldron belonged to Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, the leader of a drug smuggling cult that also performed ritualistic human sacrifices. The group mainly operated in Mexico. Constanzo practiced his own kind of twisted version of Palo Mayombe, a form of African Caribbean religion. The cult engaged in drug trafficking, human sacrifice, and ritualistic practices. Constanzo believed that these rituals granted him these supernatural powers and protection that would aid in the group's criminal activities. In 1989, a series of events unfolded which led to the downfall of the cult. A kidnapped victim managed to escape, and he informed authorities about the cult's activities. And then in a subsequent raid on the cult's compound, Constanzo and several other followers died in a shootout with police. And we're kicking off this list with Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was a group led by Marshall Applewhite, who believed that its members could transcend their physical form, reaching a higher level of existence in outer space, which he referred to as going to the next level. Towards the end, the group had rented a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe that they all lived in, and when the time finally came, ingested phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and downed it with vodka in an attempt to rid themselves of their physical form and board a spaceship that would take them to this next plane of existence. All 38 of them died along with Applewhite. I've always had this very dark fascination with this group. I find this one incredibly unsettling. All cults are unsettling, but there's an availability of footage for Heaven's Gate that makes it feel, I guess, more real, I suppose. You can watch Marshall Applewhite's initiation tape on YouTube. You can also watch testimonials of several members on video before they took their own lives. And what's so unsettling about this whole situation is how normal they all seem. Definitely not Applewhite, but the followers. They're talking like they're about to graduate from college or something. Look at Charles Manson in interviews, and he's doing all the, oh yeah, like he seems like he's from another planet, right? But then the Heaven's Gate members, they don't sound like people who are out of their minds. It shows just how easy it is to get wrapped up in things like this, and that these are real people who go through these kinds of things. They're lonely, they're seeking some kind of community, something bigger than themselves. It's sad. It's sad, really. Number 9, The Family. Anne Hamilton Byrne was the leader of The Family, a New Age cult established in 1963 in Australia. She claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The cult practiced a blend of New Age spirituality, Christianity, and Eastern mysticism. The family adopted 28 children who were raised within the cult and subjected to horrible mistreatment. Hamilton believed that there was going to be an apocalypse and was attempting to form a master race that would rule the world. They all had their hair dyed blonde, they all wore identical clothing, and she claimed that she was the biological mother of all of them, and that the other adult members, they were referred to as their aunties or uncles. Authorities carried out a raid in 1987, and the children were thankfully rescued from the premises. The Ripper Crew. The Ripper Crew definitely feels more like a gang of psychotic criminals than a cult, but they did perform ritualistic ceremonies. They operated in Chicago in the early 80s, composed of 4 members, led by Robin Gett, who referred to himself as a Satanist, Edward Spreitzer, Andrew Coco Rayleigh, and his brother Thomas. The gang engaged in a series of very heinous crimes. Their primary focus was kidnapping, torturing, and unaliving young women. They targeted vulnerable individuals and would mutilate their victims, even eating parts of their body in satanic ceremonies afterwards. The members referred to themselves as the Rippers due to their imitation of the notorious criminal Jack the Ripper. Eventually, the authorities arrested the members of the crew, leading to their convictions and imprisonment. One member was released from prison in 2019 though, Thomas, who had been quoted saying that everyone thinks I'm a monster, but I'm not a monster.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Raelism. Founded in 1974, this cult believes that life was created by aliens. Yes, you heard me correctly, aliens. These aliens then assumed human form to go check in on Earth and see how things are going. These aliens are said to be people like Jesus or the Buddha. So this cult spends their days worshipping space aliens. The scariest part, in 2000 they claimed that they founded a cloning company and that they managed to successfully clone a human. Literally everyone went nuts, and the White House even got involved in this, even though they never had any proof of the cloning. Unless the White House was like, okay, we'll pay you guys, just give us this device so we can clone people, but it stays between us. Dude, imagine? Okay, like that's freaky. Come in our 6th spot, we have Matamoros cult, aka the Human Sacrifice Cult. In 1989, a man named Mark Kilroy went missing when out on spring break. Turns out he was kidnapped and then lost his life to this cult. This cult was known to kidnap people and take their lives as a sacrifice. The leader of this cult, Adolfo Constanzo, told his members that by doing so, they would become invincible. Why would they need to become invincible? Well, they were not only a cult, but they were also drug dealers as well. But Constanzo promised that they would never be caught by the police so long they continued to harm and sacrifice others. In the end, Constanzo was caught and then was killed in jail. But rumor has it that the cult is still around to this day. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Doomsday Cult. Now, this one is pretty vague because there are a number of doomsday cults out there, but they all pretty much follow the same belief. Now, there are 2 types of doomsday cults. One that predicts disasters and thinks that the end is near, and the other one tries to destroy the earth to bring the world to an end. Either way, both are terrifying and you definitely don't want to get mixed up in it. Both cults have been known to brainwash their followers. So they don't believe what the media is telling them and only listen to the lies of their leaders. Either way, they believe that like, hey, we're gonna die soon, or hey, let's try and make everyone die soon. So it's terrifying. Moving on to number 4, we have the Order of the Solar Temple. This cult was born off of the beliefs of the Knights Templar, and is said to be one of the creepiest cults out there. It is believed to have been founded in the late 1970s to early 80s. For the most part, the cult was peaceful. They had some weird beliefs, but they didn't do any harm. That was until 1994, when they believed that a member's son was the Antichrist. As a result, they killed both individuals. Then they enjoyed a Last Supper before taking their own lives by poison. On that day, 53 cult members lost their lives. It's an absolutely terrifying and heartbreaking story. To this day, this cult still exists. Moving on to number 3, we have the Shinrikyo cult. Founded in 1984 by a man named Shoko Ashara, this is a doomsday cult as well as a terrorist organization. Basically, members of the cult believe that the end of the world was near, but that they were going to be the only survivors. Why? Well, the leader said he had powers and could transfer his spiritual power to his followers to take away their sins. In 1995, this cult carried out the deadly Tokyo subway sarin attack, where 13 people died and thousands got injured. Apparently, this was done as an attempt to start the apocalypse, but also to stop the authorities from shutting down their cult. As a result of this attack, 13 members of the group got the death sentence, including the leader Shoko. After his death, the name of the cult was changed, but to this day, it's still active. The cult was never banned and it has about 1,500 followers. Coming in at number 2, we have the Church of Euthanasia. Founded in 1992, this cult literally promoted people to take their own lives. Their whole belief was that the world was dying because of overpopulation. So they were like, let's get people to kill themselves to restore the balance in humanity. They even set up an assistance hotline where people could call in and someone would help them take their own life. That is seriously the most messed up thing I have ever heard. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Church of Scientology. Is the Church of Scientology a cult or religion? Well, a number of people think that it is indeed a cult. You've probably heard of it because of famous Hollywood star Tom Cruise. He's a very prominent figure in the church. And this cult is certainly one you never want to get involved in. For starters, once you're in, the church will force you to disconnect from people not involved in the cult. This includes your family and your friends. Jenna Miscavige Hill, a member of the church that left in 2005, had this to say about it, and I quote, "I was allowed to see my parents only once a week at best, sometimes not for years." So when you do want to leave, you literally have no one to go back to since you cut them out of your life. That's the other thing, leaving is so difficult. Apparently they will intimidate and harass you into staying. According to another ex-member, they also brainwash their followers. And if anyone misbehaves, they send them to this prison camp, where they are basically worked to death and barely fed to teach them never to be disobedient. There's also rumors that this cult commits crimes and murders, but they're so powerful that they can just get away with it all. If that's not scary, then I don't know what is.
And we're starting off with this image here. This photo was taken during a ceremony of Order of the Solar Temple. This is a very secretive group who would never want their practices being made known to outsiders. It's actually kind of surprising there are actual photos of them in their secret meetings, to be honest. So this group is pretty bizarre, very disturbing. Yes, they are still around today. Luckily, there hasn't been any real drama in recent years, though. This is a doomsday cult. At least it was in the 80s and early 90s. It mixed Knights Templar stuff with space. Love a good mixed genre kind of cult. Sci-fi and knights. I'm sold. Oh wait, you mean I gotta shed my physical body and reach a higher plane of existence on a distant planet, and the only way to do that is to take my own life? I'm out. On October 4th of 1994, 53 members of the cult in Canada and Switzerland either took their own lives or violently took the lives of others, and then the homes where they died were set on fire. 2 similar events would take place in the months that followed. There is something so unsettling about the photos of them during their ceremonies. Obviously, this group was involved in these horrific incidents, but even setting aside the context, if I had no idea what these pictures were, I'd still find them a bit creepy. The robes, the Templar style iconography, the old graininess of the images, it all just makes me feel uneasy. Staying with the Order of the Solar Temple for number 9 here, this is another unsettling image for you. This is a coffin being carried out on a stretcher from a house in Quebec, Canada. You can clearly see that there had been a fire in the house. This incident took place in 1997, a few years after the initial mass unalivings took place in Switzerland. 5 members took their own life inside the house before it was set on fire with an automatic ignition system. Next, we have the Superior Universal Alignment. This photo here is of the cult's leader, Valentina de Andrade, when she was being arrested, a moment she would probably rather forget. Superior Universal Alignment was a cult in Brazil that blended dark satanic elements with UFOs. The media focused more on the satanic element, as this was the late 80s and early 90s, and the whole satanic panic thing was still somewhat of a thing. But also, Some believe this group was involved in organ trafficking. So what happened is that between 1989 and 1993 in Altamira, Brazil, a number of young men either went missing or were found dead under very violent circumstances. Authorities had a hard time identifying the culprit until two of their prime suspects mentioned they were in a group called the Superior Universal Alignment. This group was again led by Valentina de Andrade. She had this very odd belief that males born after 1981 were essentially evil because she'd been contacted by extraterrestrial beings who told her so. Anyway, she was investigated, but there wasn't enough evidence for her involvement in the crimes to land her in jail. Luckily, 4 other members were convicted, but Valentina ended up fleeing to Argentina, where she disturbingly still preaches her insane beliefs today.
Coming into number 7, we have the lizard smokers. In a secluded spot outside Aligarh in India, there is a cult of, well, actually, I honestly don't know what you'd call them. Vice did an article about them and called them sinister with Y's instead of I's, so I guess we'll go with that. So here are some pictures of a few of the members wearing masks, and I have to say, masks generally are just a bit of a no for me. It seems that the group are rebellious anarchists who are against the strongly religious environment that they were brought up in and surrounds them. They take drugs, they pledge blood oaths, they smoke lizards, they dig up bodies, drink blood from their skulls, and they break into churches and mosques and destroy their property. In the Vice article, one of their journalists actually went to a few of their meetings, and they were told in advance that they had to masturbate before they arrived in order to be more relaxed. They were also told to take a bath, wear black clothes, bring 5 candles, incense, a silver chalice, a small bell, and a blade. Cool. Coming in at number 6, we have Nuwaubianism. So Nuwaubianism started in the 1960s in Brooklyn and was founded by leader Dwight York, who in 2004 was sentenced to 135 years in jail. The group created an Egyptian-style compound and took ideology from a number of popular religions, including Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Not only did these guys wear traditional Egyptian clothing, they also had some wild ideas. So, what did they believe? They believed that all white people are murderous and genetically inferior. They believed that aborted fetuses were actually being dumped as live babies into sewers and would one day grow up and take over the world. They also believed that Jackie Kennedy Onassis gave birth to Satan's baby with the blessing of the Pope. Oh, and they also supported child sex slave trafficking. Boo for them. Not feeling good. While the leader is firmly in jail where he belongs, the cult still exists and is headquartered in Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn. Ugh, I don't like this. At number 5, we have flirty fishing. Flirty fishing, what a treat. It seems that this is an offshoot practice from the Children of God cult. In basic terms, it's an evangelical prostitution ring in which men are fished, like literally, by fisherwomen. It's creepy. It's creepy. It seems that women are forced to have sex every day with a variety of different fish, or men. Here is a cult member trying to explain it. Have a little listen.
And so she's going to use the women to fish for the men, to bring them into the kingdom of God through flirting. Only the flirting was more than flirting. It was actually, religious prostitution.
Basically, women would have sex with men in order to induct them into their sect, or something along those lines. Okay, next up, this makes me feel a lot better. Is it a cult? Is it a shrine? I couldn't not mention this on this list. We have the divine Danny DeVito at number 4. It seems that hidden in the inner bowels of Purchase College in New York, there is a shrine to actor Danny DeVito. I guess when I say inner bowels, I kind of mean it, as the shrine is hidden behind a paper towel dispenser in a toilet cubicle. Walking through a secret hole, you can see a cutout of the Hollywood actor standing amid offerings. The room contains strange spray paint symbols and, well, I don't know, why don't you have a look for yourself?
Alright, leave an offering for our Lord and Savior Danny DeVito.
There is a sign in there that invites you to leave an offering for the Lord and Saviour Danny. It seems students invited DeVito to the school to visit his secret worship room, and Danny DeVito responded to the news with this tweet. He said, "Your shrine honours me, my heart is filled with love and garbage." He then went on to say, "Tomorrow, as you may know, is my name day. Do something that makes you feel good. Above all, be kind to each other, pick up trash, recycle, and be aware of plastics in the ocean." Thanks, King DeVito. You have spoken your words. It is up to us to listen and carry them out. More toilet shrines. Good. Coming into number 3, a different direction, a more worrying direction, we have the universe people. Psychedelic aliens. Sounds fun, but actually then I realised cult. Psychedelic aliens are never fun when it's part of a cult. The universe people, or cosmic people of light powers, is a cult that originated in the Czech Republic and was founded by Ivo H. Mender. They believe that a group of aliens are circulating and watching the Earth and will one day guide the chosen to a new place. It seems that not all aliens are good though. In 2007, the cult caused a stir when they sent instructions on how to defend against evil extraterrestrials to the Slovakian Ministry of Defense. It seems that some of the material read, "If you are attacked by a lizard man from an outer world, the Ministry of Defense should defend the people. Shouldn't it? Or do you consider those lizard people as friends?" Honestly, I'm really baffled by this. What are they trying to say? A lot of people are actually really worried about the existing universe people cult because of the Heaven's Gate tragedy in 1997. 39 members of a very similar UFO cult called Heaven's Gate killed themselves in a mass suicide, leaving a curious note that read, "Halebop brings closure to Heaven's Gate. Our 22 years of classroom here on planet Earth is finally coming to conclusion, graduation, from the human evolutionary level. We are happily prepared to take this world and go with TI's crew." It makes me sad. Psychedelic aliens, not so great. Coming in at number 2, we have the snake cult. It seems that there is a small community called JoJo in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. It's a super religious sect that handles snakes as a key part of their faith. Here's a little clip of them yielding the serpents and dancing. It seems that the group have taken a paragraph from Mark 16:17-18 in the Bible very literally. It encourages people to, I quote, "take up serpents, and if they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover." So basically what happens here is they comb the woods for poisonous rattlesnakes and drink poison together and proceed to play with fire as some kind of sign of how much they love and worship Jesus. They believe that God anoints people and protects them from harm. In the congregation, the church have a hand-lettered statement that reads, "The pastor and congregation are not responsible for anyone that handles the serpents and gets bit. If you get bit, the church will stand by you and pray with you." What a relief. The same goes with drinking the poison. Cool. Snakes and poison. Snake handling was popular back in the early 1900s, especially in the religious southern states, but since those days it has been condemned, and for very good reason. Okay, so you thought the Danny DeVito cult was weird, you were freaked out by the snake handling, but wait until you hear this. Coming into number 1, we have the Prince Philip cult. Our Lord and Saviour, inappropriate Prince Phil. Okay, but to me this actually has to be like the weirdest cult of all time? Am I right? Am I missing something? In a village on the island of Tanna in the Pacific, people are obsessed with Prince Philip, the husband of the Queen of the United Kingdom. They think he's a divine being. It seems that they think a local volcano erupted and impregnated a village woman who birthed a white man who then went away to marry a queen. Good. Process. Steps. I guess they don't seem too hostile or scary, it's just strange. Who am I to judge though?
Or did a fun mask cause offense?
Still not judging. Also, impregnated by a volcano. Mate, that sounds painful.
And we're starting things off with NXIVM. NXIVM was a secretive self-help organization founded in 1998 by Keith Raniere, initially promoting personal development courses. It eventually devolved into a highly manipulative cult. Not that any cults are really not manipulative, but anyway, Ranieri's leadership tactics were incredibly exploitive, preying on vulnerable individuals seeking personal growth. He established a hierarchical system within the group where women were branded with his initials, and some were coerced into engaging in physically intimate relationships with him. This was labeled as this secret sisterhood of sorts, but it was really just a means of control. Ranieri used deceptive tactics to maintain his power and influence, isolating members from their families and blackmailing them. Many who attempted to leave faced threats and legal battles carried out by the group. In 2019, Ranieri was convicted of his crimes and sentenced to 120 years in prison in 2020. Number 9, the Order of the Solar Temple. This group was founded in 1984 in Geneva by Joseph de Mambro and Luc Jouret. The group took heavy inspiration from the Knights Templar, at least in their appearance, all wearing white robes with red crosses. There was also a heavy amount of secrecy as to what went on in the group, and members had to ascend in the ranks undergoing initiation rites in order to learn the secrets of the group. They also believed that the end of the world was imminent and that the apocalypse would happen at some point in the mid-90s. Just some point. Very safe way of convincing your members of your doomsday prophecy at some point soon. The group were also taught by their brilliant leaders that life was just an illusion and that the physical body must be shed in order to experience a higher existence on another planet. De Mambro and Jouret ended up convincing several of the members to take their own lives. 53 members, including Jouret and De Mambro, took their own lives at various locations across Switzerland. They were found dead by authorities after remote control devices had ignited fires at the various locations. And then the following year, similar incidents occurred in 2 other locations, France and Canada. Next up, we have Synanon. Chuck E. Dederich founded Synanon in 1958 in Santa Monica, California. Started out as a drug rehabilitation program, although the methods used for care were pretty extreme. The whole idea was quitting cold turkey, which is not a bad thing at all, but in terms of the therapeutic side, members took part in an activity called The Game, where each member would open up about themselves and then receive verbal attacks from all the other members. People also lived at the compound. I feel like if you ever join some kind of religious or self-help kind of group and you're required to stay in a shared living space like indefinitely, it's a good chance you're probably in a cult. Oh, and members were forced to pay large sums of money for membership and perform physical labor. Dederich's methods only got worse though, as he enforced stricter rules on the group and incorporated brainwashing techniques in order to assert his control over them. Eventually, he ordered 2 members to take out a lawyer who was representing one of the members, saying she had been brainwashed and held at the compound against her will. The 2 members put a venomous snake in the lawyer's mailbox, and he nearly died after being bit. Chuck received a very light sentence and a fine, but was chucked out of the cult. Synanon did continue on without him until 1991 though.
Number 7, Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians broke off from the Davidians Seventh-day Adventists in 1955, but didn't make headlines until the infamous Waco siege in 1993. In 1981, David Koresh took over the group, which was headquartered at a commune called Mount Carmel. After allegations of mistreatment within the commune, on February 28, 1993 at 4:20 a.m., the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to execute a search warrant relating to the charges. The ATF attempted to breach the compound for approximately 2 hours until their ammunition ran low. 4 ATF agents died and another 16 agents were wounded during the raid. The FBI then launched a siege that lasted for 51 days and ended with the compound being destroyed by fire. Now, David died along with 76 others, and a governmental investigation later concluded that the branch had started the fire themselves. Number 6, the movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. Wow, now that name is a mouthful. So this sect formed in the Kangyu district of Uganda in the 1980s and taught its members that they had to follow the 10 Commandments in order to survive the apocalypse, which the leaders believed was coming in the year 2000. When January 1st, 2000 passed without incident, shocking, I know, members began to question why their leaders had failed to get their apocalypse date right, and leaders then predicted that the real end would come on March 17th. truth. Now, it did, but not because of anything supernatural. The leader set fire to the movement church, ending the lives of as many 530 people inside. Authorities later discovered the bodies of more victims at the group's other properties in Uganda and concluded that the leaders had orchestrated the deaths in response to turmoil caused by their repeated failure to predict the apocalypse. Number 5. Good News International Church. Good News International Church was founded by Paul Mackenzie and his first wife in 2003. It's adamantly anti-Western, with amenities such as healthcare, education, and sports being dismissed as evils of Western life, and with Paul condemning the United States, the United Nations, and the Catholic Church as tools of Satan. The group also devotes much of its teachings to the end of times. Now, Paul accumulated a sizable following, largely due to convincing his followers that he could speak directly with God. Now, the group attracted international attention in April 2023 when it was revealed that Paul had allegedly instructed members to starve themselves en masse to meet Jesus, which had resulted in the deaths of over 400 people. Not to mention, more than 600 people are still reported missing, a regional official said. Now, Paul did not join his followers in the mass starvation though. In fact, a dietary menu was found on the wall in one of the special houses in the forest believed to be his resting room. Now, he is currently under police custody as the process of exhuming bodies continues, and police authorities claim that some bodies were missing organs and believe that they are being harvested and sold. Number 4. Heaven's Gate. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the 1970s, Heaven's Gate was a cult that had a complicated belief system involving aliens, spaceships, and an intimate recycling of the planet Earth. Now, after Bonnie died in 1985, Marshall took the group to even further extremes, and in 1997 Marshall taped himself and Dew's final exit, speaking of a mass self-elimination and the only way to evacuate this Earth. After asserting that Comet Hales-Bopp was the sign the group had been looking for, as well as speculation that an unidentified flying object, UFO, may have been trailing the comet, Marshall and his 38 followers prepared for taking their own lives in a ritual so their souls could reach the next level before the closure of Heaven's Gate. Members believed that after their deaths, a UFO would take their souls to another level of existence above human, which Marshall described as being both physical and spiritual. Their preparations included each member videotaping a farewell message. Now, to end their own lives, members took phenobarbital mix with applesauce or pudding and washed it down with vodka. Now, after ingesting the applesauce/pudding mix, they secured plastic bags around their heads to induce asphyxiation. They all wore the same uniform and Nike shoes and had $5.75 in their pockets. Number 3. Synonym. Synonym, originally known as Tender Loving Care, is a new religious movement founded in 1958 by Charles E. Chuck Destrich Sr. in Santa Monica, California. Originally established as a drug rehabilitation program, Synonym developed an alternative community center on group truth-telling sessions that came to be known as the Synonym Game, a form of attack therapy. Now, the group ultimately became a cult called the Church of Synonym in the 1970s. People of all professions worked to give their money to the group, often doing tremendous amounts of physical labor. Synonym at one point had $33 million in assets. As Charles's hunger for power grew and the rules of Synonym became stricter and the mistreatment became more rampant, Charles compiled an enemies list, which ultimately became a hit list. One included lawyer Paul Montez, who wanted to help free families kept in Synonym and had won a $300,000 judgment against Synonym for abducting and brainwashing a member. Now, this enraged Charles to the point that he ordered 2 of his Imperial Marines to place a venomous rattlesnake in Paul's mailbox the following months. Now, Paul was bitten but barely survived. Police raided Synonym and a drunk Charles was arrested in his home on December 2nd, 1978. He was sentenced to 5 years supervised probation, fined $5,000, and ordered to no longer run Synonym. The group was shut down forever due to violence and tax fraud in 1991, and Charles died on February 28th, 1997. Number 2. The Kirtland Cult. Mormon extremist Jeffrey Lundgren claimed he was a prophet and could talk to God. He took an unpaid position as a temple guide at the Kirtland Temple but was fired for embezzling tens of thousands of dollars. After losing his job, he started his own church with members who felt the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was becoming too inclusive to women in the LGBT community. Jeffrey rented a farmhouse for his followers to live in, and he would soon meet the Avery family, who had moved from Missouri to join his group. Although they gave Jeffrey thousands of dollars, he still found it sinful that they didn't live on the commune and had saved money from selling their previous home. Jeffrey had several criticisms about the family as well. He disliked the husband Dennis, thought the wife Cheryl was too independent, and felt their children were misbehaved. Jeffrey then had become more violent and paranoid in his beliefs, and he encouraged male followers to start firearms training to prepare for the end of days. He also devised a plan to take over the Kirtland Temple. However, members shared these plans with police and it never happened. Now, Jeffrey later preached that he would bring Zion to Kirtland if members got rid of their belongings and moved into the wilderness. The Avery family was on board and prepared to do so, but Jeffrey told others the family must die to reach Zion. On April 17, 1989, the entire Avery family was invited to the farmhouse and had their lives ended by Jeffrey and several members of the Kirtland cult. The family's bodies were found beneath piles of garbage, soil, and their personal items in January 1990. They had been bound and gagged, thrown into a pit, and shot. Jeffrey was convicted of homicide and died by lethal injection on October 24, 2006. And coming in at number 1 is Scientology. Scientology is a set of beliefs and practices invented by the American author L. Ron Hubbard and an associated movement. Estimates put the number of Scientologists at under 40,000 worldwide. As you may know, many celebrities are a part of this group, like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, and Elizabeth Moss. Scientology beliefs include reincarnation and that traumatic events cause problematic engrams in the mind. They claim that an activity called auditing can remove the engrams, and a fee is charged for each session of auditing. Once an auditor deems an individual free of engrams, typically after several years, they are given the status of clear, aka it's just a cash grab. There have been controversies involving the Church of Scientology, and they include criminal behavior by members of the organization, including the infiltration of US government, organized harassment of people perceived as enemies of the Church of Scientology, Scientology's disconnection policy, in which some members who are antagonistic to the organization, and attempts to legally force search engines to censor information critical of the Scientology organization. Now, this cult is clearly still active today, which is scary.